Bonnie, and this is the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter, where we lay the cards on the table and talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So shuffle your deck, pull up a chair, and join us at the Tarot Table. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter. Today we're going to talk about our favorite spreads, and we're going to talk a little bit about what a spread is just to begin with, and then Peter and I are going to share our favorite spreads. So Peter, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. All right.
What is a spread?
What's a spread? So for those of you that, are just starting out with the tarot, the spread is the word that we use to describe a card layout. Now, a spread is often a predetermined set number of cards where each card that we lay is defined by either a concept or a question. I'll give you a common example and then explain how that works. So if many of you, if you're using a beginner text of some kind, you're probably seeing something called the mind, body, spirit, or body, mind, spirit, or in whatever order there. That would be a 3-card spread where the first card would be associated with things of the mind. So, what's your thought process? What's on your mind? What's troubling you? What kind of conflicts are coming up? So that card would be read with the idea of the mind in mind. Body would be the second card that you lay down if you're doing them in that order. And then the card that you read in that position would be related to things of the body: health, routine, wealth, fitness, all of those kind of things that are body related. And then the third card you would lay, as you can hopefully now figure out the trend, would be related to spirit. So it might be connection to divinity or to divinity or to higher self. It might be, how are you feeling within your spirit? So the card speaks to spirit in its third position, and the cards together, the spread, the 3-card spread of body, mind, spirit, or mind, body, spirit, whatever order you put them in, is kind of the container that holds that idea. So, again, a spread is a predetermined layout of a variety of number of cards. If you go and look, you'll find 2-card spreads and 3-card spreads and 10-card spreads and 12-card spreads and an infinite number of combinations, but it is a predetermined number of cards with a defined either question or concept associated with each card. Anything that you would add to that, Bonnie? I hope that was clear for people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say the exact same thing. The nice thing about having a spread, especially when you're starting out, is that it's exactly what you said. It kind of puts it into a container.
Yeah.
So each card placement has its own meaning. So exactly what you were saying about mind, body, spirit, that first card you pull is a reflection of what's going on in the mind and so forth. So it's a really nice way to sort of go a little bit deeper with your card reading and give you a little bit of like an outline as to what to follow. So, and in the beginning, if we can sort of suggest something, would be maybe stick with something a little bit simpler, right? Because there are so many spreads out there and things can get really overwhelming. So if you're just beginning to read tarot and you want to go for that Celtic cross, that's like 10 cards, sometimes 11.
Yeah.
That can get really complicated. So make sure that you're starting out with something really simple that you resonate with. Just because somebody's telling you to use a specific spread, if that doesn't really feel good for you, then make sure that you find something that resonates and that's simple to remember, because you don't want to be asking a question and then trying to figure out what spread you're going to use to answer that. So
yeah, and I always think determine ahead of time what your intention is. So know the spread that you're going to use and think about that before you even lay any of the cards down, and then give yourself permission, especially if you're starting out, to recognize that your interpretation in each position is going to be limited. You might lay 3 cards down and within 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, you're done. You're like, okay, well, this card means this card means this, and this card means this. And be okay with that. As you start to work with the tarot more and more, and you start to deepen your knowledge of each card, then those 3 card spreads are, the interpretation of them is going to be a little bit deeper. And that conversation between you and the tarot, you and that spread, or even you and someone else, if you're doing work for somebody else, is going to take that much longer. But probably not at first. At first, you're going to be flipping through your book or looking on your website or going through your notes or your journal, and probably working pretty quickly. So be okay with that. Be okay with that.
Yeah. And I love what you said. That's a great reminder about know what spread you're going to use before you start pulling the cards.
Yeah.
Because that can completely change the interpretation of the reading if you pull the cards and then go, oh, right, I'm going to use this spread. So really have that intention and play around with different spreads. You're probably going to start off with something that you really love, and that might evolve into something different. So don't be afraid to try different things and see what you like best and what works for you. You're going to find that there's going to be some spreads that you really love to use, or it could be that you're going to find out today, Peter and I use pretty much the same spreads over and over.
Yeah.
And we're going to share those with you in a bit. But yeah, don't be afraid to try new things, but just maybe try to keep it a little bit simple in the beginning. But
yeah, that's really good guidance, for people. So thank you for sharing that. Have you got a spread that you want to share? You want to start off by sharing one of your favorites?
One of my favorites. Yeah. Yes. Okay, sure. Thanks, Peter. This is literally the spread I use all the time. And I sort of modify it, well, not modify it, but I go a little bit deeper. So I always start with a 3-card spread. And I use this for myself every day. I also use it for people that I'm reading for. It's evolved over time for me, and it's really simple and can cover so much ground. So I don't really have a name for it. I'm sure I could come up with a really grand name.
There you go. Or maybe as people hear the description, if they could come up with a name, they could actually put it in the comments or in the comment section. That would be interesting. Name Bunny spread.
I love it. Yes, thank you. I think it does have I've seen it out there as other descriptions of 3-card readings, but it's basically, so the first card that I pull is basically what's happening in the present situation. So this could be about yourself. It could be about a question that you're asking about. So what is the energy right now going on in that situation? Or what's the energy coming up for you right now? The second card that I pull, I relate that to like something that could be challenging or blocking you regarding that first card. So everything sort of relates together. So the first card's that current energy. The second card could be something that would be challenging or blocking you. And then the third card is what's going to support you to move forward. I always like to leave a reading with some type of guidance so that I can take it or leave it, but it's guiding me to do something that's going to help me to move forward. And I've shared this reading with some other people, and they're like, well, what if a negative card comes up in that guidance, right? Like, what's going to help me to move forward? And it's a negative card. Well, what we could perceive as a negative card in the tarot. But then I think about, well, what is that card trying to tell you? If it's about maybe letting go of something or healing a certain part of you, that's what's going to help you to move forward. And same if we're looking at that challenge card in the middle, if it's say the Sun card comes up in that position, that's generally a really happy card. If that's blocking you or challenging you, then what is it about that card that you can start to embody to help you? Because right now, in some way, you're blocking receiving that joy or that success or that happiness. So I really love the way that it gives you guidance on how to move forward. And it's not necessarily telling me the future or what's going to happen. And then after I pull those 3 cards, especially if I'm reading for somebody else, I'll always ask them, do you want to go deeper into these cards? And then quite often I'll pull more cards in that exact same order. So again, for the present, okay, let's get a little bit more information about what's going on in the present. Okay, is there something else that's challenging you here? And then what's going to help you to move forward? That is my tried and tested and true spread that I use for myself. I do that every day when I pull cards for me. And what I mostly use when I'm working with other people. Not to say that I don't ever use other spreads, but that 90% of the time is what I'm using. So,
Yeah, I
how
love the
about you,
idea.
Peter?
Well, I love the idea of the guidance, like that kind of finishing off that, with a bit of the guidance piece. And when you talked about, being specific, and great example of, the sun in a challenging, in the challenge position, you remind me of a friend of mine and a mentor, and like I'll say tarot, great local James Wells, who always talks about the importance of the question and
Mhm.
how that question or position of a spread, excuse me, impacts our interpretation. So, like you said, right, that sun card can mean very different things if it was in a guidance or outcome position than it is when it's in that middle challenging position. So no, I that's a I hope you find a name for it, or hope somebody finds a name for it. It's one that I could see adapting to my own practice. So I wasn't as clever as I was reflecting on spreads I use, because I was thinking of, I use one, I don't know, I call it like, it's like a maintenance check-in. Um, it's the kind of thing, why am I stuck?
Mhm.
In whatever area, what's happening, with my connection? Why does my spirit feel so low? So I kind of use it as a maintenance spread, and I call it my heels, heart, head, and hands. So, and I base it on keywords that I use to identify the four elements that are associated with the tarot. So fire, water, air, and earth. And I use the first position as kind of the heels or fire position, the second one as the heart's position, or kind of that water position, the third as head, so for air, and the last is hands for earth. And I use that spread as a general check-in on how I'm feeling, or what I need to know, or what I need to connect with in each of those areas of life. So as I flip a card, for example, in the heels position, then, I'm looking for, well, what's motivating me right now? What's driving me forward? And like you said, if it's a negative card, and for those of you who are listening and can't watch, my air quote, went up. If it's a card that's perceived as a challenging card, then, that idea of being driven forward could be that, I'm being driven forward by a challenging situation, or it might be that the challenge is presenting itself in a way that is preventing that motivation, preventing that drive, preventing that fire. I use the word heels because it's our heels, our feet, that kind of move us forward. And then the same thing for each of the other ones. For the second position, which is the heart's position, it's like, where are my emotions sitting? What does my intuition look like? That world of water, how is it being represented in the card that gets laid down in the heart position? And then head, the same thing, and then hands, the same thing. So I really am trying to reflect on my passion, my drive, my emotional state, my mental state, and then my physical state. So I really do use that as a check-in. And then I value and honor the positions of the cards that show up, but then I also shift to a more sort of global sort of reading style, which I'll talk about with my sort of second spread, which is a little more free flowing. So then I'll think, well, if I'm really focused on those four elements and I flip four cards, is there something that's there in abundance? Did I just flip three pentacles, and is regardless of the positions, and are the cards saying, wow, Peter, like, you're really focused on health, or you're really, into your body, or your health or workout routine has been extremely important. Or am I seeing an absence of cups, despite the fact that, one of the positions is there as the heart? And I'm going, well, I wonder if, there's an emotional void. Is there something that you need to work on? So I have a tendency to focus both on the position, so that, that the positions are important. So that idea of heels, heart, head, hand. So I kind of do it in I'll say, the esoteric order of hierarchy of the elements. So fire, water, air, earth, but then also look at it, more globally, which I'll talk to when, I talk about that next sort of, non-named, no spread. But I don't use that every day, but I do use it often enough as, like I said, as a maintenance check-in. Something's not quite right, or I'm I'm feeling this way and I'm not sure why. Then I'll
Mm.
stop and go, okay, let's do that global check-in. Let's see where we are in our heels, heart, head, and hands. So yeah,
I love
that's
that, Peter. Do you, and I'm going to try that because I'm very connected to the elements. When I teach yoga as well, a lot of times I'll refer to the different parts of the body as the element that we can help to balance within ourselves. Because of course, we're all made up of the elements.
that's right.
But when you're using that spread, do you notice, or have you noticed if those elements correlate to the elements that you're pulling? So if you're doing the heels and if that, is
Shows up
what
as
you relate
wands,
to
you mean? Yeah,
fire.
pulls
Like, are
up
you
fire.
pulling wands in
Yeah.
that? Like, do you notice that or?
So I'm when it happens, I'm aware of it. But yeah, I don't notice a trend where it's like, oh my goodness, I knew the tarot every time, I talk
Oh,
about
okay.
heels and the fire shows up. Because I think for me, it always reminds me that we're so intertwined with the elements as well. That, our fire doesn't work in isolation. When we talk about the concept of what drives us forward, there are times when it's something that is linked to our heart, what we love and what we care for, and where our emotion is, it drives us forward. And there are other times where it's more practical things, more earth-based things that drive us forward, and other times still where it's a thought or an idea or it's a mental process that drives us forward. So, that's fire. That's that passion, that initiative, that creativity that sits inside the fire element that,
Mhm.
I've used three examples that link it to the other three elements as well. So I really do try and pay attention to the blend of the element. I also, when a major arcana card shows up, as I've mentioned in the past, I pay really close attention because I think when the majors show up, they're basically saying, "Hey, look at me! Hey, look at me! I'm over here! I'm over here!" And then I would look at their astrological association, whether or not they have an elemental association as well. So the Fool, for example, associated to air, if that showed up in the head section, I would really pay some close attention because we've got element, major arcana falling right in the position of air, which is that head position. So I don't notice the trend, but I definitely
Mhm.
pay attention to both the element of the position and then the elemental association of the card for sure.
Yeah. And I think the other like I'm loving the spread now. I have to to play around with this. But like depending on what does show up for you in that position, if you're pulling for, well, again, use fire as an example for heels, and if you're getting water, it
Right.
could be that you need something from the water element to balance out that fire,
Correct.
right? And maybe if a fire element shows up in the fire, it could
Mhm.
be in excess of fire.
Correct.
So who right? Like it'd be really interesting to see how that plays. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I'm
No, no
totally
worries.
going to try.
Yeah. Okay, good. And same, right? Same. I'm going to try yours. So, we're learning. Yeah, we're participating in the podcast process, but we're learning from each other at the same
We're
time. So
learning
that's great.
too. Well, that's why we did this because we
It
thought,
is.
we learn so much from each other. We thought
Yeah.
that we could share what we're
Right.
learning
Yeah, that's a good
with
point.
everybody else.
Good point. All right. You got another one?
Yes, I do. Okay, so something else I do all the time. I'm a Libra. I'm a terrible decision maker. So I love the tarot. And not that I'm super like versed in astrology, but I
Yeah.
think one of the traits of the Libra is having troubles making decisions. So I turn to the tarot and to other cards as well for help to help me make a decision. So what I'll often do is I'll write down different options on a piece of paper and I'll put them, like I'll cut them out, right? So there's like different pieces of paper with the different options, and then I'll pull cards. Generally, three. I love three. I love the number three. So I usually pull three cards per option, and then I do a reading based on that option. And then I'll see from the energy of that entire reading what would be my best course of action. So it doesn't have necessarily like a standard format. You could sort of pick whatever type of reading. You could even just pull one card. Sometimes I do that too. Um, have different options laid out in front of you. You could use different decks for this as well. So if you say this, I love the sun card. So say the sun card shows up and you're like, oh, this is a perfect yes, this is what I should do. But you don't want to take away from the sun maybe showing up in another option. So sometimes I'll use different decks for the different options that I have in front of me. And then I look at them all together as opposed to doing different readings for each option, if that makes sense, right? So like I want to look at it, all of it as a whole so that I can make my decision. So I absolutely love to use the tarot to help me make decisions. And again, it's not the tarot telling me what to do. It's giving me options and me being empowered to make that decision. And sometimes I'll pick a reading that maybe doesn't look quite as good as another one, but I'm thinking like, oh yeah, maybe this is what I need to do. Like maybe there's some challenges that I need to work through and I'm ready to do that now. So it's a really good way to help you get some insight if you're having trouble deciding on something.
Yeah, and you touched on something that is very important, that you're not allowing the tarot to make the decision for you, but when you work with it, it's giving you options that you wouldn't have thought of before because
Mhm.
you're having that dialogue based on cards that are showing up from a deck that you've shuffled. So that's in some ways, and we've talked about this before, in some ways you're using that idea of chaos theory almost to shuffle cards and say, okay, give me what you've got to say. And then by interpreting the card, you give some thought to an option. You still have the agency to say, yeah, I appreciate the advice you're giving me, oh dear tarot deck, but I'm not going to go down that path at this particular point in time. So yeah, that idea that it's not making the decision for you, that you're making the decision, I think is a valuable one. So, thank you for reminding people of that. Now I got, and you had mentioned that before about working with two different decks. Um, at some point in time, I'm going to have to do that because that to me just sounds like an absolutely fascinating way to go about the work. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. What about so you touched that you were going to talk about some like not using a spread or like this
And
more free flowing.
I know, and I don't know, like I don't know what to call it. And I've heard kind of people refer to it as a non-spread spread.
Okay.
Um, Liz Worth actually talks about this quite a lot in her practice. And in my own practice, I would use a very, very similar style. So this is my most common way of working with the tarot. It is how I work with clients almost exclusively. I would probably call it a narrative spread. So I'll say usually common 3 or 4 card. And this is where, almost intuition comes in. There are times when, so this is a non-position based spread. So what I mean, sort of a non-spread spread, I mean that, the cards themselves don't have set positions, but the cards as a story or as a line tell a story. And what I'll usually do is I'll kind of aim for 3 cards. And then when based on just a quick interpretation or even, intuition, I'm like, it doesn't feel like a complete story. I'll flip a 4th. Rarely will I turn, well, I'll say I can't think of a situation where I've used more than 4 cards. And then I'll look at the cards as the story that they tell. So, and I'll start with the first card, so the card on my left, and I'll kind of make my way through the story as if it was a story. Oh, this looks like this has happened or happening, moving on to this card, then moving on to this card, and finally with possible outcome or option or challenge, again, depending on the card itself. And I go through that process, and then I start to look at, what I would call sort of the deeper meanings and symbols of the card. So then I start to look at the card's astrological correspondences. So, you kind of alluded to the fact that, I do have an affinity towards astrology when it comes to the card. So I'll look at even the links of the cards to the minor arcana. And then I'll think, well, what's kind of going on in the sky right now, or what might be going on in my own birth chart, or even, what kind of information can I glean from the fact that, this card is also associated with Mars, or, is associated with the, sign of Aquarius. And how does that interpret what it is that I'm looking at? I would look at some of the esoteric symbols. So I think of 3 of the 4 aces that have those kind of yods that, are dropping these little flames of divinity or things like a pomegranate that shows up, on several cards, or the ornate cups, or the flowing gowns, or the greenery in the background, things that are common in the Rider-Waite-Smith that would be seen as sort of esoteric symbols. I take a look at objects, and I think, well, if somebody is holding a cup or a coin, what are they doing with it? Are
Mm.
they gazing at it, kind of like the Page of Pentacles does, kind of gazing at this pentacle in their hand? Or are they holding them tightly like the Four of Pentacles? Do they have these coins kind of stuck to their body, one on their head, two underneath their feet, just afraid to let them go? And would look at interpretation from that perspective. I look at the colors in the background and think, are they blending together to tell a story, or are they really in opposition and contrast to each other? Do we have a story that flows nicely with a background of, the kind of yellows and blues, or does it get hit really hard with a card with a black background,
Mm.
like a kind of stark reality or a wake up card? So like, and then I'll say, well, if there are characters in there, which way are they facing? Are they looking at each other? Do they look like they're supporting one another? If they're, if they've got an object in their hand, and the hand is facing towards another card, does it look like the person in the other card is ready to receive what this card is giving? So I really do try and connect, I guess, and this is why I call it a narrative spread. I try and connect narrative elements of things like setting or action or plot inside the cards, to the story that the tarot is trying to tell. So in some ways, it's a blend of practitioners who work in that vein. Sometimes it's a blend of almost Rachel Pollack's very story-based and narrative style of reading cards, but I've adapted it to my own. And because I've been working with the tarot for a while, sometimes three or four cards, if I'm working with a client, that can be a 45 to 60-minute session where we're literally going into those cards deep, and then talk about the perspective of quality versus quantity of cards, and the message that we can get by looking at cards individually and then stringing them together through a narrative spread. So sometimes, cards 1 and 2 tell a story together, and 3 and 4 tell a story together. Sometimes the beginning and the end, of the story, kind of meet with these interruptions. The tower shows up at card number 2, and you've got nice free flowing cards at 1, 3, and 4. You can think about a narrative or a situation where there is a bleak kind of about face, or there is a challenge that presents itself that we weren't anticipating. Those kinds of things. So I love it for the freedom that it provides in interpretation. And I even tell some of my beginner students, don't be afraid to try that free flow, because I think a spread does a great job, as you mentioned, of providing context and container to meaning. But then the other side of that is a more narrative style really does allow you to hone your intuitive skills when it comes to the tarot. If you're learning what the cards mean, then you're not going to look at a card like the Tower, for example, and say, wow, that looks like a very strong card of joy and and outward love and compassion. No, it doesn't. It has a broader range of meaning that doesn't sit in that container, but is all about abrupt change, or shaky foundation, those kind of things that really do sit inside a card like that one, and you can integrate it into your story. So I don't know if I've done a good job of explaining that sort of non-spread spread or a narrative style spread, but it is a primarily 3-card spread, sometimes a 4-card spread, where each position isn't outlined, but where the line itself, or the cards themselves, which I do lay out in a straight line from left to right, the same way, kind of a story in my society anyways would be read, which would be from left to right. So that's the other one I wanted to share, because I like its freedom. I
Mhm.
like the depth of interpretation. I like the fact that you really can go pretty heavy into just a small number of cards. So I don't know what you think about that one.
Yeah,
That's
no, I
out there in esoteric land for me.
no, no, not at all. I sometimes do that. I like go rogue and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going to put
Right.
any meanings to these to the placement of these cards and I'm just going to read the cards as they show up. So for me that's a little bit more challenging, I think because I'm so like analytical about
Mhm.
things, but it also gets me out of that thinking that, it has to be this way. So I do love to do that as well. I'll just pull cards just to see what the story is saying, as opposed to saying, well, this card is a challenge and this card is going to support me. Like it's sort of getting all the energy of that story together. So thank you for sharing that.
No,
and
no
and
worries.
and
No,
to tell people not to be afraid to do that, right? Like
exactly. And
see
to
how the
highlight,
cards interact.
we've approached the tarot from very different ways as well. So it's also knowing that if you work better in a space where that definition, of card and that analysis of position is important, then do a spread that allows you to do that with each card.
Mm.
And then if not, then do a spread that allows you a little bit more freedom, but don't don't get stuck in, oh, I'm really good or comfortable with this area, so I just won't go over there. Sometimes our best learning happens when we work inside those spaces that challenge us. So I don't like working with predefined spreads. It's one of the reasons why I have to do it from time to time, because if it was really up to me, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't think so. I'm gonna do the freedom to do whatever I like with these, no positions, no, 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 no questions.
No
So
questions. Well,
exactly.
and it's funny because it kind of plays on what it is that is comfortable for you
Yeah.
and what you need. So for me, I need boundaries.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that I create very good boundaries in my life. But when it comes to tarot, I like that idea
Uh-huh.
of having a boundary.
Hmm.
And maybe that's my way of creating boundaries for myself is how I use spreads. And for you,
It's
maybe
really interesting.
because you have a lot more structure and I don't know, I'm just I'm just projecting here, Peter. But like for you, maybe it's
You're
like this
allowed.
idea of freedom. It's like, oh, I don't want to have boundaries. There's so many boundaries in other areas of my life. I just want to free flow this and let it. So I think that's an
Could be.
interesting way to look at, the things maybe that we need or the things that we need to explore, right? So
No, it's a really good. I would probably agree, certainly with elements of what you said. Um, for me, it would be probably the work that I had done before was so structured and bound by both schedule, by people's demands, that freedom really didn't exist inside the context of work. Whereas working with the tarot, it's like, yeah, I can all restraints are off, can work with in whatever way I want and choose a much more free flowing way. But you do a great job of letting people know that, know what your style is and be
mm,
okay working inside whatever style works for you, but then push yourself to kind of work in an area that just challenges you a little bit, because sometimes that's really where some great learning comes from. So, yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to share one last
Yeah. Okay.
spread,
Yes, of course.
if that's okay.
Yeah, it's fine with
Uh,
me.
I do this on a yearly basis, and I do this sort of as a little present for myself. I like to do it on my birthday, and it's actually a 13 card spread. And I'll explain why that is in a minute. But you could do this for your birthday. You could do this for a friend if you're reading for friends or for clients if you have clients. You could even do this at the beginning of the year, or you could just do it as a 12-month ahead of time. It doesn't have to be on a birthday, it doesn't have to be on a new year. But the idea is pulling 13 cards for the year ahead. So if you're starting this, we'll call it a wheel. If you're starting this wheel, okay, right now it's June. So I want to know in 12 months what the energy of the cards like it's going to come up for me. You would start for July. So your first card would be July, then you would pull 12 cards for the whole year. And what I also like to do is pull a 13th card, and that's the energy of the entire year. So I actually pull two cards for each month because that's just what I like to complicate things. So I'll use a tarot deck for my 13 cards. So my 13th card, which is this energy that's going to be for the whole year, is a tarot card. But I also like to use an oracle deck to go along with the other 12 cards to indicate the 12 months ahead of me. And then that just gives me a little bit more information, the energies that I can work with between those two cards. So I love to do that. But I have to go a step further, because if I just take a picture, or if I just write it down, I often forget. So I actually put in my phone on the first of every month those two cards that I pulled, and I keep them out on my desk. So right now, so for the year that I did in September for my birthday, my year card is the Fool. So I always have the Fool sitting on my desk to remind me of the energy of the Fool that I have for this year. And then this month I have the 10 of Wands, which we talked about in an earlier episode. And then another card I have, an oracle card that I pulled, was Inner Peace. And I keep those as a reminder. So I think I was telling you about this earlier, Peter, but I was doing some work, and then I was trying to do a lot of things, and I literally gazed at the 10 of Wands, which is my card for the month of June. And I'm like, oh, Bonnie, you're probably doing too much. Like, what is something that you don't have to take on? So for me, it's a really great reminder of like that card's coming up for me. Why? I don't know. But like, if I look at sort of the deeper meaning of that, I can use that to help me in that month. So again, not predicting like, oh, something is going to happen this month, but what is the energy of that card? What can I remind myself that will help me get through that month? Or, so I love to do that once a year, and it's a great thing to do for people's birthdays. And it's just something fun. And another good way to help to get you familiar with the cards. If you're doing that for yourself, then you can, dive into 12 or 13 cards. So,
and you've got so yeah, thank you. Because what you have with that is, I'll say, the benefit of time. So you have a card, and you talked about your example of 10 of Wands, or it'd say 10 of Wands, 10 of Swords.
Yep. 10 of Wands.
And you have a month to focus on, well, what message is that card giving me? So the guidance that you got, where it's like, oh, there's, one more possible task. No, I may be carrying I may be carrying 10 wands. That's and it gives you time to sit with that 10 of wands energy for an entire month, and then focus on what happens in July, and focus what happens in August. Very interesting that in the year of the Fool started a podcast. I will just say that jump off
taking
the cliff,
a leap of faith,
right? Exactly. That's yeah. Wow. It's great. I got 3 great ideas that I'm going to have to integrate, and I hope everybody does as well. I hope that some of the things that Bonnie and I shared with you will resonate with you. That you'll try 1, 2, or perhaps even all 5 as part of your practice. But as part of our practice in this podcast, we always want to finish off by doing a single card draw. Have you got your cards all set and ready to go?
I do. I know you like to use the same deck, Peter, and I always sort of flip-flop between my decks. And I was being called to a deck that I haven't used in quite some time. Okay. So I'm going to use the Phantom Wise Tarot, which I think you have as well.
I think I was going to say, I think it's sitting in the background for those that are there. I can see the box right there.
So I think I'm going to use that one today. Okay. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb today, and I'm going to use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Have you ever heard of it?
I think I have, actually.
All right, now you're pushing my practice. Get out of my comfort zone. So for the next episode, I promise I will use a different deck.
No, I think that's amazing. I think that you have this deck that you're so deeply connected to, and it's provided such a foundation for you. I mean, I just like to, harass you a little bit.
And you're allowed, harassment is allowed. I'll totally accept it. I'm a Rider-Waite-Smith fan. But look, we just finished telling people, make sure that you push yourself out of your comfort zone so that you can do some learning. So I will do the same thing. So yeah, next episode, new deck. Do you want to pull your card first? You want me to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll pull first. Right. And like I said, I did use this when I first got it. I used it quite a bit, and then it's been sitting on my shelf for a while. So I think it wanted to be woken up a little bit. And that's something too, that when you have a lot of decks, sort of listen to the energy of what that deck, like, is that deck calling you? Sometimes I think I'm going to use one deck, and then I'll be like, no, oh, there's another deck that
Yeah.
wants to
And
be used. So I heard
it's
the
based on a
calling.
favorite, it's based on one of my favorite books too. So that
Oh,
deck.
right. Okay. And I do love black and white. And it's a black and white deck. So, okay. I'm shuffling the cards and let's see what comes up. I'm going to take the first one on the top. Ah, it's the Four of
Of swords. All right.
Swords.
Well,
I do love the Four of Swords because I am a meditation teacher. And
and the card could be called meditation, right?
yes, it
Yeah.
could be actually. So this is such a beautiful card. This deck is really lovely and it's sweet, it's charming, it's also quite gentle. And it has a woman who's lying down in a bed and she's holding a sword, and there's three other swords above her. So when we see the Four of Swords, it really is an invitation to rest. And if we think about the card that comes before the Four of Swords, it's the Three of
Yeah.
Swords. And quite often with the Three of Swords, we've gone through some type of loss or heartbreak or just a lot of sadness. And when the Four of Swords comes up, it really, really is an invitation to just take time for yourself, for self-care, whatever that means for you. If that's meditation, if that's taking more naps, if that's going to the spa for the day, whatever really makes you feel nurtured and cared for, that's a really important message that you're receiving. On the flip side of the Four of Swords, if you do feel like you're withdrawn or taking too much of that Four of Swords energy, then that might be an invitation to kind of dig a little bit deeper, maybe do some more healing work to help you get out of that space. But I think the most important message is to really look after yourself. Know that, relaxation practice, this is where that part of me is going to come in and give you a whole lecture on the importance of relaxation. We always, think we have to do more, be really busy. But when we don't acknowledge this idea that we do need to relax, the only way that we can heal our bodies, our minds, is to get into that state of deep relaxation. It's super important. So definitely an invitation for that. So if anybody's been feeling really busy lately and this card calls to you, really take some time for yourself and look after you, because you're the most important person. Right?
Yeah. It's great guidance for that card for sure. I had somebody refer to that card, and I know that you got a yoga background, and I might even mess up the name, but I think I'm gonna be close enough that you'll know it. Is it Shavasana?
Shavasana. Yeah, corpse
So
pose, which
yes, and that somebody has referred to that card as the Shavasana card, and I thought that has always stuck with me because it really is a card. Because in some ways, the corpse pose, that idea of the death pose, the person in the card, they look like they might be dead, and that idea of the three swords sort of dangling. And then you talked about the Three of Swords, and when I look at that card, I think the Three of Swords is still in the background of that card. There are still three swords that, whatever that challenge that presented itself in the card that's preceding, is actually still kind of in the back of your mind, because swords are in that mental energy. And from a physical perspective, those three swords are still in the background of that card, that iteration. And most iterations of the Four of Swords have three swords kind of somewhere in the background, with that fourth sword near the person who's at rest, who's meditating, who's in Shavasana.
right.
Pronounce
Well,
it
and
right?
it's
I got it right?
oh yeah, Shavasana is right. Yeah, you said that perfectly, Peter.
All right.
And quite often, people will refer to that as the most difficult pose in yoga,
Of course.
even though it's literally like you're lying down,
Yeah.
it's in rest. But a lot of people have a hard time doing that.
Totally.
And I think too, with the Four of Swords, what it can allude to is burnout, right? If you don't look after yourself,
Right.
you could end up,
Yeah. Like the Ten of Swords.
like the Ten of Swords, exactly, finished. So you really, really want to look after yourself and self-care. So
Okay, great. All right. I'll shuffle the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Have you heard of this deck? This is
I think I've seen a couple images before, Peter.
that's all right. I can take it. I can take it. I can take the teasing. I can take the harassment. I will just focus on the card. I will draw the top. Do the same thing.
No, I really need to work more with the Rider-Waite-Smith and like the decks that really mirror those images.
Well, and the like Aaron Morgenstein, right? Night Circus, the deck that you just did, the Phantom Wise, a lot of them the same when you look at them, there, that's where the image comes from. So top card I drew, look at this. I actually talked about this card a little bit earlier.
The Tower. Oh no.
Page,
Oh, the
no, the
Page of
tower.
Pentacles.
If I had pulled the tower, that would have been kind of funny, actually, because I think I
That would
mentioned
have
that one
been.
twice. No, so Page of Pentacles. So I always think of pages as kind of that rudimentary energy, that unformed energy of the element. And this could represent something like a project that you're just starting out. So think of the earth-bound energy of pentacles, which is in the realm of hands. So it's stuff that we do, stuff that we touch. And then the page, which interestingly enough, its element is also linked to the earth. So this is kind of, an earth of earth card. So what we have is very initial stages. We've got the start of what is probably a tangible journey. I'll put it down now. We've got something that is slow moving. The page of Pentacles is sometimes so slow moving that it's frustratingly so. So, this is probably speaking to a project. It might be nature based, work based, health based, physical based. It's really in that realm of Pentacles that is exceptionally slow moving. It's plodding almost. And the Page of Pentacles really has no interest in moving forward. And I talked about this before. Like, they're just happy to stand and gaze. They're hours and hours and hours. They've got this beautiful gold coin. They're just going to look at it, right? They're just going to take a look at it. And what they're missing is all the beauty that's around them. And you can kind of see that again. For those of you that are watching, you can see that in the card. And for those that aren't, the very bottom, the bottom quarter or so of the Rider-Waite-Smith Page of Pentacles has lush background and mountains. It has trees, and the page isn't looking at any of that. They are so focused on this pentacle energy and their slow moving, their slow moving kind of plotting energy. I always think this card it's almost akin to the Fool card. It has that same sense of naivety and innocence, but instead of kind of a foolish way of being, like when we talk about the concept of being, which is really where the major arcana sits, like it talks about us as being. Page of Pentacles talks about us as doing and as acting, right? The minor arcana is very action based. It's the stuff that we do every day. So when a card like this one shows up in the Page of Pentacles, it might be, new opportunity for learning. It might be a new, maybe it's a new craft or it's a new health routine. But we have to be prepared with this Page of Pentacles that whatever it is, it's not going to want to move fast. It's not going to want to move forward of its own volition. So a Page of Pentacles is really a card that requires the support of other things, of other cards, for us to look inside of ourselves to draw on other energies to move forward. So that's kind of where I would look at with the Page of Pentacles. Did anything to add to that or to question about that Page of Pentacles?
Well, Peter, I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but that the first time that we met and we pulled cards for each other, you pulled or I pulled from your deck was the Page of Pentacles, that exact card.
Yeah.
So whenever I see that card, I think back to that reading.
Yeah.
But no, I love what you said about the Page of Pentacles. I often think about pages, and again, this is more a reflection of me and what I need to be reminded. But when I see a page, I think of that youthful, fun energy. And sometimes I take life so seriously. And when I see a page, I'm like, Bonnie, have some more fun, like this childlike wonder and innocence, and you're just doing it because it's fun and it's fresh and it's young. And I also, like what you said, it could bring a message of a new beginning, something maybe like a small raise at work or a new project, a new opportunity. So whatever that is for you, like just taking that first step is really important. It's the very beginning of a journey, and it doesn't have to come like fast and furious, right? It can come slowly and have patience, but take time and look at it with sort of this childlike wonder
Wonder. Yeah.
and fun, right? That youthful energy. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
No, that's a great, great insight for that card as well. Anything else that you want to share before we, say goodbye on what are we episode 7 now? We done We're at the
Yes.
end of 7 episodes. That's fantastic. Talk about, new venture with, Page of Pentacles and, the Fool energy that you talked about, for this being the year of the Fool for you. Anything
Yes.
you want people to be aware of or that you'd like to share before we?
I think again, and I think this is, excuse me, the message that we always say is don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah.
If you want to do like a crazy 21 card spread, and that calls to you,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to do that, but just start somewhere, explore some different options, and then just know that your practice will evolve over time, and nothing ever has to remain the same. So we hope that some of what we've shared with you will help inspire you in some way, or even validate maybe you're already doing some of those spreads. So we hope that you've got some insight from that, but just don't be afraid. Again, we like to say have patience and just enjoy the journey. Like tarot is so fun. At least I think it's fun. It's brought so much joy to my life and so much insight, and that's what we hope to share with you. So how about you,
Right.
Peter? Any
Yeah.
final?
Nothing. I have nothing to add. Yeah, I think I have nothing to add to that. Nothing to add. Well said. And I'll just say ditto. How's that?
Well, how can people find you, Peter? And what do you have going on?
Well,
You have a
people,
whole life outside of
yeah,
tarot,
I
don't
do.
you?
I do. And people can find me at peterwhitetarot.com or even at Peter White Tarot on Instagram and Facebook. And I would take a look at our previous episodes if you want specifics around what's happening with some of the courses coming up and some of the work. I would highlight non-tarot stuff. So we're in the month of June in a small town I live in. We just had a massive blues and jazz festival. I actually play keyboards, which if you're watching, you can kind of see behind me. I play synthesizers in an 80s cover band. So if you're interested in 80s music, go and give us a follow at Stolen the Band. That's either on Instagram or Facebook. We're there in both places. If you're liking artists like The Cure and Peter Gabriel and Depeche Mode and U2, that stuff that sort of sits inside that 80s genre, then go and check us out. So not sharing anything tarot. If that's what you want, then by all means, go check out my website. But I'd love for you to check out our band as well. Bonnie,
And
how
I've,
about you?
I've heard a rendition of one of Peter's songs that he actually sings. So
Yes.
if you like Sympathy for the Devil, you're gonna have to hear that, because you would think you were hearing Mick Jagger's.
Well, that's very kind of you. That's very kind. It is at this point in the show. It's the only song that I kind of step in from behind the keyboards and sing. I love it. I have a blast. But yeah, so now you got a sense of the kind of stuff that we do. And based on Bonnie's recommendation, go and check us out. How about you, Bonnie? What do you have going on? Where can people find you?
Okay, so the easiest way for people to find me is my website, which is breathewithbonnie.com. So there I share my love of tarot, my love of teaching yoga nidra meditations. And yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff on there. I have a blog. You can join my newsletter. You'll get a free meditation. So that actually coincides quite nicely with the Four of Swords. If you're in need of some relaxation, you can get access to a free meditation that will help you to relax and go inward. So you can find all that out about me on my website. I'm not very active on social media, but you can also follow me at Breathe with Bonnie on Instagram.
Awesome. And again, for those of you that are coming along with our journey with the tarot, if you like what you're hearing, we would love for you to click on that like button, that subscribe button, or even, place some comments in the comment section, or a review on Spotify, if that's where you're listening, would be fantastic. With those words, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we will see you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.